All right. We are the sports fans coming live to you today. My name is Kellen Hansen, otherwise known as the Crimson Comet.
My name is Brady Palmer, otherwise known as Lazy Snake.
I'm Prison Mike.
And I am Jason Call, the Bearded Wonder.
So today is our first day of our new segment. We call it our 15-minute bash, sports bash. That's title is not permanent, but we're going to just discuss one topic that we think is of interest to our viewers, and that is the pending fight between Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones of the UFC. Now, for anybody who follows the UFC at all, you know that this is the hot topic right now in the sport. A lot of people are talking about this as potentially the greatest fight in UFC history. Brady, why don't you fill us in a little bit on the intrigue and some of the events leading up to this fight?
Yeah, so I guess it all started when Jon Jones decided to go up to heavyweight, move up a division. He's always been a light heavyweight, decided to go up to heavyweight. And it was basically announced that he would face the winner of the Stipe Miocic-Francis Ngannou fight. Francis Ngannou ended up just destroying Stipe Miocic, just obliterating him. And Jon Jones has been a little hesitant about the fight because of the money situation. He's been on the phone with the UFC, and they said they'll pay him between $8 to $10 million, and he's saying that he wants a lot more than that because the fights make a lot of money. And potentially, if this fight does go through, it'll be a guy in Francis Ngannou who we saw just have one of the toughest performances ever and just completely destroy Stipe Miocic against arguably the greatest fighter ever. So if this fight can go through, it very well could be the biggest UFC fight to date.
Jason, why don't you fill us in on why, as UFC fans, we should care so much about this fight?
Well, Jon Jones is a GOAT. I mean, he's one of the greatest fighters in his division that we've seen probably ever. But the way Francis Ngannou took care of Stipe, he's a scary man right now. I'm intrigued for this fight because Ngannou can do a lot of damage, but Jones is a good fighter. So it's going to be a great matchup. And honestly, I can see the betting odds in this fight being virtually 50-50 because that's how I feel about it. Both these fighters have a chance to win this fight.
Prison Mike, as kind of our casual UFC fan, I just want to hear your opinion. When you look at this fight, obviously you don't have a whole lot of background knowledge on either fighter, but what do you see from your perspective as somebody who has casually watched the UFC and is kind of starting to get into it?
So I guess I do have like one or two ideas. First off, I feel like it will be a good fight. I mean, obviously, anytime you hear about, I've heard about Jon Jones and he's undefeated and how good he has been. And then I recently watched a Francis Ngannou fight, so it's an intriguing matchup. It's interesting, and just one thing that I do think is important still though is the fight is not set in stone, which doesn't mean it's like absolutely going to happen. And I think I don't know a whole lot about the UFC obviously and how the fight contracts work and different things like that. But where they haven't come to agreement, it just makes me wonder. There's always a chance that it's not even going to happen.
Yeah, interesting. So a little bit of background as to the current, as to the reputation of these fighters. Obviously, Jon Jones is considered one of the goats of UFC. He's actually currently ranked the number one pound for pound fighter as of March 23rd, and here's why. Jon Jones has been fighting since 2008. He made his debut when he was 21 years old. Since then, he's gone on to have 28 total fights. He's had 26 wins, 1 loss, and one no contest. But remember, his 1 loss was by disqualification due to an illegal elbow. Other than that, he has 10 title defenses to his name at the light heavyweight division. And one thing that a lot of people need to remember is that Jon Jones, his background, father of a pastor, grew up in a very stable home. His two brothers, Arthur and Chandler, former NFL player. Chandler Jones, obviously an All-Pro outside linebacker, currently for the Arizona Cardinals, and his brother Arthur played for the Baltimore Ravens, Colts, and the Washington football team. So this is a guy who, look, you look at his family, you look at him personally. This is a guy that is so accomplished, and he's completely changed the UFC. You look at some of the guys that he's beaten. He's beaten, Anthony Rumble Johnson. He's beaten Daniel Cormier. So this is a guy that we've never seen lose, and he's fought some absolute monsters in his career. But he's going up against Francis Ngannou, who has really taken the mixed martial arts game by storm. 19 total fights, 16 wins, 12 of them by knockouts. And some of his losses, if you look at his record, he has some losses to his name. Lost to Derek Lewis in 2018, lost to Miocic in 2018. But since losing to Derek Lewis, he has not had a single fight until Stipe Miocic go into the second round. He knocked out Curtis Blades in the first round. Then he knocked out Cain Velasquez in the first round. Then he knocked out Junior Dos Santos. Then he knocked out Rosenstrike before he took on Miocic and knocked him out 52 seconds into the second round. This guy's nickname is Predator for a reason, because of his ability to knock people out, and his striking power is almost unmatched. So when you compare these two, a lot of people tend to want to favor Ngannou. Is kind of a sentiment that I've seen recently. A lot of casual fans, I will say. But I want to hear your guys' opinions as to how do you think this – first of all, do you think this fight's going to happen? And what do you think the UFC needs to make happen in order for Jon Jones to accept it? We'll start off with Jason. I can't hear
Sorry,
you.
I had to mute for a sec. So what I see with the UFC side of things, what they need to do is they need to pay that man. They need to give Jon Jones what he wants, because that's probably going to be one of their most watched fights in recent history and probably in future history, if that makes sense. But it's a big fight for them, and they need to, if it's about money, pay the man. Like, he deserves it. And Jon Jones is a scary enough man that I hesitate to say this, but I almost wonder if he's making it about money because he doesn't really want the fight. But if I'm the UFC, call that bluff, pay him, and see if he still goes for it.
Mm-hmm. Brady?
Yeah. So I have a few different thoughts on this. First of all, I like how Dana White, I feel like Dana White made that comment in his post-fight press conference after the last fight about how if he was Jon Jones, he'd be going the other way and going down to middleweight. And I feel like Dana White may have done that just to kind of get Jon Jones angry and make him take the fight. I feel like that was a good move by Dana White. But I agree with Jason. I feel like the UFC does need to pay Jon Jones. I agree that it's going to be one of the biggest fights that we've ever seen. And ultimately, the UFC makes a ton of money from these fights. So I think they can shell out a little more than $8 or $10 million for the fight. So I think when it's all said and done, the UFC will give in and they'll end up paying Jon Jones. And the more I've looked into Jon Jones in this fight, I've decided that I am not a Jon Jones fan. So I hope this fight goes through because I want to see him get his head bashed in by Francis Ngannou. I'm just leaning that way. I do not like Jon Jones, I've discovered.
I like that. Well, I mean, Mike, you go and then I'll share my opinion.
So yeah, I pretty much agree with these guys. I feel like Jon Jones is a tiny bit scared because I would be as well. and so he's wanting to make as much money out of this as possible.
You know who Jon Jones should be scared of, Mike, is you.
He should be scared of me. He should be scared of me.
Yeah,
But
this is Mike. Mike's calling out Jon Jones, by the way.
I am.
Look,
I want to fight Jon Jones.
I'm Mike's promoter. And look, Jon Jones, you might have been able to take down some of the world's baddest men, but Mike has taken down some of the world's baddest steers. As a farmer,
That's true.
he's got that farmer muscle. So you watch out, Jon Jones. You're net.
Yeah, that's exactly what I tell Jon Jones if I saw him. But
I'm tagging him. I'm tagging Jon Jones in this video on Twitter.
Good.
Oh man. Oh man.
I do think that the fight will happen just because Dana White wants it to. I really do think he'll pay the money. He's trying to get it as cheap as possible. I think he'll pay the money to have the fight. And I'm with Brady. I believe Francis Ngannou is going to kick the crap. Oh, I don't know if he will, but I hope he does. Kick the crap out of Jon Jones. I mean, Jon Jones can be an amazing striker, but I think Francis Ngannou is incredible as well. And I don't think anyone can take Francis Ngannou down to the ground. He is just too big to pick up.
Awesome. Okay, so here's how it is, guys. We need to remember that Jon Jones is probably the best all-around fighter in MMA history. Now, I'm not saying he's the most dominant. I think Khabib Nurmagomedov is probably the most dominant fighter. But remember, Khabib Nurmagomedov is so dominant because of his wrestling ability. He takes you down. He ground and pounds it. He wears you out. Jon Jones is in the GOAT conversation because he has high adaptability. He has incredible technique, and he's one of the most dominant fighters I've ever seen. He's very innovative, and his striking is solid. His wrestling is solid. His defense is solid. He just fights at a higher level. His fighting IQ is incredible. He's in my opinion, he's like Israel Adesanya, but bigger. Maybe not as quick, but he's like a bigger version of Israel Adesanya who can wrestle. That is what Jon Jones is. And as good as Francis Ngannou and as scary as Francis Ngannou is, I can't pick him over Jon Jones. Just because I think Jon Jones, when his training is done correctly and when he's in the shape that he needs to be in, he's just too dynamic. And so I'm actually going to go with Jon Jones in this fight. If it happens, that's the biggest thing. Jon Jones actually tweeted that he had a conversation with the UFC's lawyer Hunter. This was March 31st, and they offered him 8 to 10 million was the figure that they gave him. He said it's too low of a number. I agree with him. I think they need to pay the man. I think they need to pay him and Francis Ngannou because these are the two scariest men on the planet, and they could potentially fight each other. So I love what Dana White's doing to get leverage, but I'll tell you what, I think that he needs to swallow his pride a little bit and give us this fight. I don't say that because I love Dana White, don't get me wrong. I think Dana White treats his fighters fairly, but I think that Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou deserve a huge payday. What are your guys' thoughts? Just to wrap it up.
And Kellen, I agree with you. I think Ngannou deserves to get paid, but I think Ngannou deserves to get paid on a bonus side on if he wins that fight. Jon Jones, you got to think he doesn't have many years left. If he's 21 in 2008, that'd make him.
He's 33 now.
35.
He's 33.
Okay, so.
He's actually younger than Ngannou.
But he's been in it for so long. You got to wonder how long his career is going to be. I mean, 2008, that was 12 years ago, almost 13 years ago now. That's a long time to be fighting. So we'll see. I mean, and let's be honest, he's kind of coming out of retirement and moving up to do this. So pay the man. Let's see if it happens, and if he can show he can beat Ngannou, man, that makes the heavyweight division really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope we see it, and I think you're right. Dana White just needs to swallow his pride.
All right. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
I think we covered it. I agree with most of what was said.
Perfect.
Most?
Well, just before we wrap it up, Jon Jones did say recently he thinks that it will happen in a video. So on FightHype.com video. But we're looking forward to this. Before we sign off, I just want to say thank you to anybody who's watching this video. We invite you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Sports Fans, and we will be signing off. This is the Crimson Comet.
Lazy Snake.
Prison Mike.
And the Bearded Wonder.
And remember,
K.
G.
Brother.